Hello, world. This is Vincent again with another trip report. This time, the title of this report is We Exist. The drug in question is DMT. So let's get started. A bit about my trippy past. I've smoked the ganja for about 5 years, mushrooms about 8 times, acid about 15 times, mescaline twice, LSA twice, MDMA once, ketamine once, and a light dose of DMT once. A friend got some generic smoking herb infused with DMT extracted from mimosa. A few of us went to his house to try it out. Me and 3 friends sat down and rolled a Deemster joint. We pass it around and each take a couple of puffs. I notice that my friends are taking little girly puffs. They have no breathing or smoking technique at all. We all got to the first stages of a DMT trip, significant body high, minor visuals, and that sense of imminent death. People I was with took their little mouthfuls of smoke and exhaled quickly. That's not how I do things. Next time the joint came around, I breathed deeply a couple times to oxygenate my lungs. Then I exhaled as fully as I could before beginning to suck on the joint. I took a long, slow hit and held it in for as long as I could. I got pretty freaking high and found myself face to face with this faceted greenish wall or sheet. It undulated and oscillated, superimposed with triangles and gears. This sheet in front of me seemed thin. I had a feeling that immediately behind the sheet, which visually was about 6 inches away from me, was a vast space. After a few minutes, I came back down, still not having broken through, but I intend to. We took a break, visited some friends who lived nearby, and came back later that night to smoke some more. This time, we loaded a bowl into a glass pipe. My friends passed the pipe around with me last. Each one of them took a couple of tiny puffs and exhaled white smoke immediately. All of them felt effects, but no more than before. I decided to demonstrate the zen of smoking. They were talking amongst themselves as I accepted the pipe. I breathed in slowly and deeply a few times, exhaled fully, and torched the bowl as I very slowly inhaled. I kept the bowl cherried for 30 seconds, inhaling slowly the entire time. Leaning back in my chair, holding my breath, I felt it coming on fast. I wasn't even close to exhaling. With a roaring sound in my ears, I realized that I was about to see what this stuff was all about. I exhaled, leaned back, and my chair broke. It was my friend's house. At first, he was pissed and said something to me about it, but I was on the way out of this world. I barely heard him. With no chair, I stumbled forward, sat down on the cement, and rolled into a laying position. It wasn't a choice. This stuff knocked me to my feet. I heard one of my friends say, "Oh, look at him," noticing that I was being blasted to hyperspace. I must have had a crazy look in my face. I was not on Earth anymore. My mouth was wide open. Unfortunately, it wasn't exactly pleasant. I spent probably the next 5 minutes in some form of personal hell. I remember God from my Catholic school childhood and realized that with the ignorance of that age held innocence. I knew that I had drifted far away from that innocence. I was being punished, and I knew I deserved it. I was in a personal hell, and I felt I would be there for eternity. I did not think I was coming back. How could I ever be the same? I was swimming through geometric chaos intertwined with poignant and emotional imagery from my past. God, God did this to me. God finally had enough of my shit and decided to fuck me up. I did not expect this. God, I did not expect this. God, God, it's my fault. This carnival of terror seemed like a fitting and deserved ending for my wasted, selfish life. I realized I would never be the same again, and I would not be capable of functioning in society. I would end up in a mental institution, living in this perpetual hell while my family occasionally came for tearful visits. Holy fuck. I managed to say, don't do DMT to my friends. And never have I been more serious. We exist. We exist. We can never experience death. Death is no experience. So you can come close, but you can't ever experience non-experience. I came as close as you could. Maybe I even went through it, but how could I know? I'm alive. I am not death. I was sitting on the edge of death. It was like I was perpetually hadn't existed the moment before and was constantly sitting on that moment. I was in a constant state of just coming into existence. We exist. What the fuck? Apparently, I yelled the words God, fuck, and DMT several times. I could hear my friends. Friends? They exist. I exist. We exist. What the fuck? Having a conversation. One said, well, we don't use most of our brain. Another, maybe that's what happened to him. He just opened it up and got flooded. They were talking about me. I was rolling on the ground with my face in my elbow. But I was returning, sort of. I got to my feet after a few seconds and said, be right back. I walked inside for the change of scenery and laid face down on the floor. I called my sister, who I had invited to come by that night, but she couldn't make it. I said, I love you. Don't do this stuff. She said, I love you too. Okay. And we said bye and hung up. Another 5 minutes, I walked back outside and sat with my friends. We talked a bit about what I had just experienced, which was exceedingly difficult due to the indescribable nature of the experience, compounded with the fact that I was still tripping balls. I kept saying, dude, it was just, fuck, I don't fucking know. My friends would say, you mean you don't remember? No, I remember, it's just, I don't know. Tell us something, a word. We exist. When the fuck did that happen? How was it? Flush that shit down the toilet. I was still tripping. I still felt as if I would never be the same. I felt like I had just been born into the moment, like I literally had never existed before. It was scary as fuck. And I thought, I'll never be the same person again, regardless of whether or not I stop tripping. That part's true. About 20 minutes later, I was pretty much back to normal, laughing at normal stuff, holding normal conversations. I realized that my DMT experience was terrifying but amazing, and retrospectively, a gratifying experience. I was too hasty when I told them not to do it, to throw it away. Obviously, they didn't. In fact, I realized that I'd be willing to do it again the next night, actually, tonight. I've come to the realization that there's life after death from many different angles. In the past, religion, drugs, philosophy, logical rationalization of the nature of consciousness. Never has it been shoved into my face so hard that reality, existence, consciousness, I am eternal, that I'm alive for eternity, as it was under the influence of DMT. There is no such thing as death. There is no such thing as death. There is no such thing as death. I know this. DMT is crazy. I still don't know what the fuck happened. I think DMT is a good thing. I took a massive amount, and I'm in a strange place, mentally anyway. Most people's experiences aren't as unpleasant as mine was at the time. Either way, I'm glad I did it, and will probably do it again tonight. Maybe it won't be so rough the second time around. It was life-changing, and I'm a different person. I wasn't ready. So that's the end of the story. As usual, I'll be giving some Christian commentary on some of the aspects of this trip. So, the first part where he talks about the build up, how he'd been smoking it with his friends who didn't have any technique. That's just you just get better at bad stuff. You just keep doing it. You just keep getting better at the awful things you do. That's true of everyone, including myself. I get better at this podcast, video, story. I'll keep getting better, but this guy, he's getting better at smoking. And well, the story unfolds. The only valuable thing I want to talk about is the part when he's in the trip where he goes past that green screen into geometric shapes and non-existence. That state of constantly coming into existence, as though he's on the edge of his seat of awareness, so to speak. It it's interesting that he talks about God. There's multiple times that he talks about God. He talks about his Catholic school childhood, which is weird that he associates God with the experience of not existing. Like, sure, he exists. He came around to write this story after all, but in relationship to God, in relationship to his past, he has linked it to this surprise that we exist, that there's anything at all. Why is there something? It's a classic philosophical question. Why is there something rather than nothing? By all normal logical rights, nothing should be what we experience, if you can even call that an experience. But this guy ties these two things, and it comes to my theology on hell. This guy did bring up how this is like I was in a personal hell, is his direct quote. He felt he would be there for eternity, is something he also said. It brings up the idea of eternal punishment. In the Bible, particularly the New Testament, sparingly in the Old Testament, I think of Daniel in the Old Testament, but anyway, mostly in the New Testament, there's the concept of eternal punishment. Now, eternal punishment is brought up by Jesus and Paul. Jesus more so talks about an eternal fire. The New Testament in general talks about eternal punishment. Um, and I generally had the basic idea of hell for a very long time, that hell is a place where you are conscious that you're in torment, you're basically being tortured, you're in pain, but you're aware of the pain. You're not unaware like this guy is, or was. You're conscious in this classic idea of hell. You're not having a good time. And I read the New Testament about a year ago, just from start to finish, just because I thought it'd be cool. And it wasn't until Revelation came around that it just changed my mind on hell. I wasn't looking to change my mind. It wasn't like, oh, let me read the New Testament and figure out what all hell is about. I just read it because I was interested in reading it. I took it as like, it's not that it's a work of fiction, but that I read the book as though it's an enjoyable book to read, like it's enjoyable to read fiction. I'm not saying it's fiction, I think it actually happens, but that the experience of reading fiction is generally a pleasant and thought provoking experience that isn't necessarily based on anything that's real. Not to say again that the Bible isn't real, but that it's the feeling of reading fiction. You expect the writers to be doing something to you. You don't expect nonfiction books necessarily to be trying to allude to certain metaphorical or symbolic themes, but I'm going too far into it. Anyway, because of the reading I did of the New Testament, I saw in Revelation how it's said of Satan or the devil and the false prophet and another character who I can't remember. There was at least three. They were said to be tossed into the lake of fire, which is also called the second death elsewhere in the New Testament, but particularly with Satan and his two buddies. They were cast into the lake of fire. And it's said there specifically, and nowhere else that I know of, there specifically, it is said that those beings are in eternal torment, not eternal punishment. That it seems like there's two different classifications. These three beings were most certainly in eternal punishment or eternal torment. Sorry, like conscious experience of pain forever is what I remember reading in Revelation, and it made me think, uh, why why is this language used right here? The language of the New Testament is written in Greek, which means the language used in Revelation would have been known to the people who wrote the New Testament. So the phrase of eternal conscious torment being in agony and alive. That was something you could put into words back in Jesus' day. But that wasn't put into words anywhere else except for Revelation, specifically there and nowhere else. That phrasing was only used there, which tells me they're aware of this idea, but they only use it here. They could have used it everywhere else that eternal punishment is used. They could have instead said eternal conscious torment. They could have said that, but the writers chose to use the phrase eternal punishment. And just something clicked as soon as I read that. I'm like, oh, is hell just like you stop existing? And at the time, like I had no clue what the phrase annihilationism meant. It was I didn't know. Like I tried googling things about the idea, and I just randomly stumbled upon the idea, and people talking about heresy in relationship to annihilationism. Eventually, found out Jehovah's Witnesses may or may not believe in annihilationism. Regardless, to say I had no clue what it was, and it just popped up in my head, and I didn't know like it was a thing that had a word to it. So that's my idea on hell, is that I am an annihilationist, that you eventually stop existing at a certain point if you're not saved. Granted, between the time of death and between the time of death and annihilationism, there's probably some length of time where you're at least judged, you're probably brought back to life, and you're probably in pain during the after death time and the second death time. There's probably a lot of fire going on there. You're probably in a lot of pain for a very long time, but it will end. The only hope you have is non-existence. So it goes, you're alive, and then you die, and then after death, you're in pain. In some point in your death time, you're going to be judged, and you're going to be brought back to life. You're still in pain, by the way. You're not dead. You're still in pain. You're conscious, and then after the judgment and the bringing alive, you're then you don't exist anymore. You're thrown in the eternal fire that doesn't die. That the fire never goes out, but you can go out. Is my view, unless you're Satan and his two buddies, or prophets of the new buddies, then you'll probably be there forever. But if you're not part of that crew, you're just generically unsaved. You'll probably just not exist at a certain point. So that's my view on what this guy went through. He probably actually did experience what it would be like to experience the second death. That constantly questioning what existence is. This idea that we exist is such a surprising idea to him. Might be because like that's where he's gonna go. Like that's what's gonna happen to him. That's a promise that God is giving him. Granted, he doesn't seem to care too much, as we can see later on in the story how he decided to trip later that night. So the whole experience wasn't too convincing to him. Makes me think of the story of the parable of Lazarus, not the story of Lazarus, two separate things. The parable of Lazarus, where Lazarus and a rich man die, and Lazarus was eating crumbs off the rich man's porch or what have you. And the rich man, who is in fire burning, sees Lazarus and asks Abraham, who is next to Lazarus, to give him a drop of water and to send Lazarus back from the dead to go talk to his brothers who are going to end up right where the rich man is. But Abraham's like, nah, bro. If you didn't care about Moses, they're not going to care about some dead guy coming back to life. If they don't care about great prophets, if they don't care about the Bible, if they don't care about God, they don't care about life, basically. And so it's basically the same idea with this guy. God gave him a sign, showed him hell, and he just didn't care. No amount of evidence, no amount of experience, no amount of anything is going to convince someone. They've got to just choose it. They've got to simply take their trust, and instead of pointing it to yourself, stop trusting in yourself. Have faith not in yourself, but instead point to Jesus, and then Jesus saves you. That's the point. There's no evidence that's going to change your mind. It's just, you use that trust that God has given you instead of for yourself, instead of using the gift that God has given you for selfish reasons. You point it to Jesus, and that's the end of that. You get saved by Jesus, not by your power. Trust isn't about your actions. It's actually saying my actions suck, and I'm not gonna do it anymore. It's a denial of action in direction of Jesus, and then Jesus saves you. But that's the end of this. A few takeaways I kind of took from this. One is maybe adding background music, maybe thinking more about the pictures that I've been transitioning to, when I might transition them, maybe add in some notes during the reading. Yeah, we'll see how that goes, and thanks for coming. Bye.